"You don't belong here." Ethan Crawford's voice cut across the private helipad, echoing against the steel and glass of the hangars. Jasmine Taylor stepped out of the sleek black SUV, her posture calm, her black blazer crisp against the morning light, sunglasses concealing eyes that had seen far too many dismissals and doubts over the years. The pilots paused mid-check, guards shifted uncomfortably, and a quiet murmur rippled through the small crowd of staff gathered at the edge of the pad. She carried nothing extravagant, no designer handbag, just a slim tablet case under her arm and a quiet confidence that seemed to expand the air around her. Ethan stepped forward, the gesture sharp, commanding, as if volume could intimidate her, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply paused, letting her gaze meet his, steady and unbroken, a silent assessment of arrogance, entitlement, and ignorance. Memories flickered at the edge of her mind. The first time she had been denied boarding at a private airstrip, the way people had whispered behind her back, the weight of 100 assumptions. She remembered being 25, standing in a line of travelers, her credentials impeccable, yet treated as invisible, an anomaly to be ignored or mocked. The moment pressed on her chest for a heartbeat, and then she exhaled slowly, letting the past anchor her strength rather than weaken it. Around her, the staff's murmurs grew louder, a few people reaching for phones, capturing the tension in real time, instinctively knowing that this was no ordinary confrontation. Jasmine's assistant had already confirmed readiness over a discreet earpiece, the verification protocols in place, the emergency fleet overrides ready to be activated if required. A gust of wind stirred the rotor blades of the idle helicopters, the sound humming like anticipation in her ears. Ethan's lips tightened, a twitch of uncertainty betraying the confidence he tried to project, his posture stiffening as he repeated the words, sharper this time, as if that could change reality. "This pad isn't for your kind." Jasmine finally spoke, her voice soft yet cutting. "I'm exactly where I belong." The words were small, almost gentle, but the authority behind them resonated, folding into the murmurs and stares, rippling across the helipad. She tapped her tablet, the screen lighting briefly, a subtle click signaling the beginning of a shift in power no one there had yet comprehended. The pilots paused mid-step, guards halted, and the crowd froze, all drawn to the quiet gravity Jasmine emanated. She didn't need to shout, didn't need theatrics. The air itself seemed to bend to her presence, commanding attention, eliciting awe. And in that suspended moment, everyone, staff, witnesses, even Ethan, understood that the ordinary rules did not apply here, that authority was not a matter of volume or posturing, but presence, patience, and power recognized silently, yet undeniably. The murmurs of the staff grew louder as Jasmine Taylor stepped further onto the helipad, her movements deliberate, measured, each step resonating confidence without the need for words. Ethan Crawford straightened, his hands gripping the railing as if it could anchor him against the calm authority radiating from her. Pilots glanced at one another, their expressions caught between disbelief and recognition, some already instinctively raising their phones to record the unfolding moment. Jasmine did not hurry. She allowed the tension to swell naturally, letting the weight of the previous dismissals, whispers, and assumptions hang in the air like a tangible force. Her assistant's voice whispered through the discreet earpiece, confirming that the verification protocol was live, that every access point, every flight log was ready to be displayed, silently signaling the inevitable revelation to come. Ethan cleared his throat, attempting control, but the words faltered as he realized that volume alone would not shift the perception here, that the authority Jasmine carried was not granted, but inherent and undeniable. He gestured toward the helicopters, his face tightening as he attempted to assert dominance. Yet Jasmine's gaze never wavered. It was steady, piercing, and unyielding. The rotor blades stirred lightly in response to a breeze, echoing like a drumbeat to the tension, a reminder that the machines themselves were part of the power she commanded. Around them, the staff became acutely aware of the shift, the subtle acknowledgement that this was no ordinary interaction, that something fundamental had changed in the dynamic of the pad. Jasmine reached the central point of the helipad and paused, the sun catching the edge of her tablet as she tilted it, a faint click signaling that the controls were being accessed, that the systems in place were beginning to assert her authority silently, yet unmistakably. The staff and onlookers froze, their collective attention fixed on her, each gesture, each blink a study in calm command. Ethan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty betraying him. As the murmur of the crowd grew, whispers forming into a wave of realization that the situation was no longer about compliance or protocol alone, but about acknowledgement of ownership and respect. Jasmine lowered her tablet slightly, her voice cutting softly across the pad, carrying effortlessly over the wind and rotor hum. "All operations are under my oversight," she said, the clarity of the words resonating deeper than any shouting could have. The staff exchanged glances, the weight of recognition settling in, and the pilots, those closest to the machines, instinctively stepped back, understanding that the authority on the pad was absolute, not because it was displayed with theatrics, but because it was real, verified, and undeniable. In that instant, the mood shifted, a quiet energy of anticipation, respect, and inevitability settling over the helipad, the beginning of a transformation that would be witnessed, recorded, and remembered, a lesson in patience, presence, and the power that is recognized without the need for spectacle. The staff exchanged uneasy glances as Jasmine Taylor continued her measured steps across the helipad, each movement commanding attention without a single word raised in anger. Ethan Crawford tried to regain composure, adjusting his tie as if that could restore authority, but the subtle shift in the air made him pause, his voice faltering whenever he attempted to speak. Around them, the murmurs of onlookers swelled into a quiet buzz, phones raised and recording, capturing every gesture, every subtle sign of control emanating from Jasmine. She stopped at the center of the pad, the sun glinting off the polished surfaces of the helicopters, and for a moment everything seemed suspended. She allowed a slow sweep of her gaze over the staff, the pilots, and the few onlookers who had gathered, letting the anticipation build, letting them feel the quiet weight of presence, the authority that did not rely on shouting or spectacle. Ethan motioned toward the nearest helicopter as if to assert control, but Jasmine merely tilted her tablet, the soft click signaling that systems were responding to her commands, verification protocols live, access rights displayed, and all operations under her oversight. A pilot stepped back, recognizing the shift, while guards subtly repositioned, acknowledging the implicit command she held over the entire fleet. Jasmine's assistant whispered a brief confirmation in her earpiece, the subtle communication threading the plan seamlessly without interrupting the growing tension. Memories flickered across Jasmine's mind. The dismissals, the whispered doubts, the moments she had been underestimated, and the quiet, relentless determination that had brought her here. She straightened, the faintest curve of a smile forming as she realized that her calm was disarming them more effectively than any confrontation could. Ethan's confidence wavered, the rigid set of his shoulders softening under the realization that authority was not always measured by loudness, but by the undeniable clarity of rightful power. Jasmine lowered her eyes briefly to the tablet, confirming final inputs, and then raised them slowly, letting the silence carry the message before she spoke, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the subtle hum of rotor blades and murmurs. "All operations are fully grounded under my direction until further notice." The statement reverberated across the helipad, the weight of the words sinking into every onlooker, shifting their perception instantly. Staff members froze, pilots halted mid-motion, and even Ethan's posture sagged slightly as recognition dawned. The crowd, having followed the quiet precision of her actions, felt the palpable energy of authority, a tension that did not need escalation because the power had been quietly, firmly, and undeniably established. The murmur of witnesses grew, not in dissent but in stunned acknowledgement, the collective attention focused entirely on Jasmine, understanding that the unfolding moment was not a simple display of control, but a carefully orchestrated assertion of ownership, competence, and undeniable presence. In that space, where the sun reflected off metal and glass, the calm command Jasmine emanated became a force that the staff, the pilots, and even Ethan could not ignore, a lesson in quiet authority and the power that is recognized without confrontation, setting the stage for the revelations that were about to unfold. The tension on the helipad held like a fragile thread, every person present sensing the shift without a word spoken. Jasmine Taylor remained centered, her gaze sweeping the staff, the pilots, and the scattered onlookers who had edged closer to witness what was unfolding. Ethan Crawford's confident posture had softened, replaced by a cautious hesitation as he observed the calm precision in every gesture Jasmine made. She raised her hand slightly, a subtle motion that seemed to command the air itself, and the hum of the idle helicopters responded, their blades momentarily still in recognition of authority. The staff murmured among themselves, exchanging glances that betrayed uncertainty, their attempts at subtle defiance faltering under the weight of Jasmine's presence. She did not need to raise her voice. Her quiet control sufficed to redirect the energy around her. One of the junior pilots, holding a tablet to capture the moment, whispered a tentative confirmation to a colleague, and suddenly a ripple of awareness spread, the realization dawning that Jasmine's oversight was complete, verified, and indisputable. Memories of past encounters where she had been underestimated flickered briefly through her mind. Moments when her presence had been ignored, credentials questioned, opportunities withheld, and now, standing on the very pad where previous doubts had arisen, she transformed that past into quiet. Authority. Ethan's mouth opened once, as if to challenge, then closed, uncertainty and disbelief softening the edge of his previous commands. Jasmine allowed a small breath, measured, and then moved with deliberate calm toward the central helicopter, her tablet signaling the activation of full operational oversight, the systems displaying access and verification for all to see. The staff and onlookers leaned in slightly, absorbing the unfolding confirmation, the subtle power in her calm gestures rendering previous arrogance impotent. Jasmine's voice finally cut through, low and precise, commanding attention not through volume but through undeniable presence. All activities remain grounded until proper authorization is confirmed. The words resonated, the calm finality behind them settling over the helipad like a tangible force, shifting perception instantly. Ethan shifted, his attempt at control diminished under the weight of irrefutable authority. Witnesses began to murmur, their whispers spreading awareness, their attention fully captured by Jasmine's quiet yet absolute command. Even the pilots, those closest to the machinery, stepped back instinctively, acknowledging that the pad was under her control, that every operation, every rotor, every protocol responded to her oversight. The crowd, momentarily stunned, began to recognize the deliberate precision of her actions, the fact that patience, presence, and verification had transformed what might have been a confrontation into a display of undeniable power. In the growing silence, punctuated only by the faint hum of the helicopters and the soft murmur of onlookers, the authority Jasmine emanated became a palpable force, a lesson in how power can assert itself quietly yet conclusively, commanding recognition without a single shout, leaving the anticipation thick for what would come next. The helipad remained still, the faint hum of idle rotor blades filling the space with an almost expectant tension. Jasmine Taylor adjusted her stance, her presence commanding the attention of every person on the pad without a single raised voice. Ethan Crawford's expression had shifted from confidence to uncertainty, his movements tentative as he watched Jasmine move with deliberate calm. The pilots exchanged glances, tablets raised to capture the moment, realizing that the unfolding scenario was not merely about compliance, but recognition of authority. Jasmine's assistant whispered a quick confirmation in her earpiece, signaling that verification protocols were fully engaged, that all systems were displaying accurate ownership and access rights. The staff began to shift uneasily, the realization sinking in that the quiet control Jasmine exhibited was absolute, verified, and undeniable. Her gaze swept the crowd slowly, deliberately, a silent challenge that they could not ignore, and the anticipation of what was about to happen hung in the air like a physical weight. Memories of past dismissals, whispered doubts, and underestimation surfaced briefly, sharpening her focus, reminding her of every moment she had been told she did not belong, of every assumption made about her capabilities. Jasmine did not need to speak. The quiet authority she projected radiated across the helipad, bending the attention and energy of everyone present to her will. Ethan's hands clenched briefly at his sides, a reflexive gesture of frustration as he understood that volume and posture alone would not restore control. Jasmine reached the central point on the pad, lifting her tablet with a subtle but deliberate motion, the soft click signaling that fleet operations were now under her direct oversight. Pilots instinctively took a step back, guards paused, and staff members froze, understanding that the pad was no longer a space for debate, but a demonstration of verified authority. Jasmine lowered her gaze to the tablet briefly, confirming final inputs, and then raised her eyes, letting the silence carry the weight of her next words. All flight operations remain grounded until further authorization is granted. The statement resonated across the helipad, clear and precise, transforming the tension into acknowledgement. Murmurs spread among the onlookers, whispers of realization, while the staff and pilots collectively recognized the shift, the quiet assertion of power that required no shouting, no dramatics, only presence, clarity, and the undeniable truth of rightful command. The air seemed to thrum with a new energy, an understanding that patience, preparation, and calm authority had reshaped the dynamic entirely, leaving Ethan hesitant, staff uncertain, and witnesses stunned, fully aware that the next moments would cement the consequences of underestimation and the recognition of the power Jasmine Taylor held. The realization of Jasmine Taylor's authority settled over the helipad like a quiet storm, shifting every glance, every gesture among the staff and onlookers. Ethan Crawford's confidence had crumbled into careful calculation, his hands folding and unfolding nervously as he attempted to assess the situation, understanding that he was no longer in control. Jasmine's presence filled the space, commanding attention with a precision that required no exaggeration, no loud proclamation. Pilots adjusted their stances, some stepping back, some lowering their tablets to observe rather than interfere, as the air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Jasmine lifted her tablet deliberately, her eyes scanning the fleet, every rotor and control panel reflected on the screen, signaling that each movement, each flight operation was now under verified oversight. The murmurs grew quietly among the staff, a mixture of awe and apprehension, as they recognized that the calm authority she exuded was absolute, deliberate, and grounded in fact rather than posturing. Jasmine's assistant confirmed the activation of additional protocols in a soft voice, unnoticed by the crowd, but amplifying the certainty of control in Jasmine's mind. Ethan made a tentative step forward, a gesture of attempted command, but Jasmine's eyes, unwavering and precise, met his, and the air shifted, subtle but unmistakable, as if the space itself acknowledged her dominance. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces of the helicopters, casting shadows that danced across the helipad in rhythm with the tension, a cinematic echo of anticipation. Jasmine's voice finally rose, measured and clear, cutting through the quiet hum of machinery and whispered observations. All personnel are to maintain positions until further directives are issued. The weight of the statement settled instantly, and the staff froze, pilots halted, and onlookers leaned in, realizing that the moment was not about theatrics but about verified authority, quietly yet unmistakably demonstrated. Ethan's jaw tightened, a small flicker of acknowledgement passing through his expression as he absorbed the reality that authority was not about volume or presence alone, but about legitimacy, clarity, and the undeniable recognition of rightful control. Jasmine's movements were deliberate, each tap on the tablet signaling data verification, access confirmations, and control of all operations, a silent orchestration of precision and power. The atmosphere on the helipad held a delicate tension, a mixture of respect, anticipation, and recognition that the ordinary rules had been suspended, that Jasmine's calm authority redefined the space, commanding attention not through spectacle, but through the certainty of her presence. Witnesses, previously uncertain, began to lean in subtly, capturing the unfolding shift, understanding that this was not a confrontation but a demonstration of competence and rightful power. Every individual on the pad felt the impact of her measured actions, the clear statement of control, and the quiet but undeniable assertion that the next phase would cement the recognition of her position and the consequences of previous underestimations. The quiet tension of the helipad seemed to stretch with each passing second, every eye fixed on Jasmine Taylor as she remained poised in the center, her tablet displaying the fleet systems with precise verification signals. Ethan Crawford shifted uneasily, his earlier arrogance now tempered by the realization that the situation had fully escaped his control. The pilots, some gripping the edges of the helipad railing, exchanged subtle nods, their expressions acknowledging the deliberate authority Jasmine wielded without a single raised voice. She allowed the murmurs among the staff to settle, absorbing their hesitant glances, their silent questions, and the weight of their uncertainty. Turning it into a rhythm, she commanded. Jasmine's assistant confirmed another sequence of verification checks, quiet in delivery but resonating with finality, ensuring that each helicopter, each operational protocol, was fully aligned under Jasmine's oversight. The sun glinted off the metal of the rotor blades, casting fleeting reflections across the tarmac, mirroring the focused calm in her gaze. Ethan attempted to interject, opening his mouth to assert authority, but hesitated, the certainty in Jasmine's demeanor dismantling any pretense of control he had held moments before. Observers stepped back slightly, some holding phones at eye level, documenting the transformation of the moment, realizing they were witnessing more than procedure. They were witnessing the quiet establishment of undeniable power. Jasmine shifted her weight slightly, a subtle signal, and the system responded instantly. Every helicopter grounded in synchronization, every access control locked, the verification protocols reflecting her command without a single word of escalation. Staff members and onlookers alike held their breath, sensing that the unfolding moment was a study in patience, precision, and calm authority, a demonstration of control that needed no spectacle to affirm itself. Ethan's jaw tightened, his attempts to reclaim presence faltering as he absorbed the clarity of her rightful command. Jasmine's voice finally rose, steady and deliberate, carrying across the helipad. All fleet operations remain under full oversight. No departures until further confirmation. The statement settled like a stone in still water, firm, precise, leaving no room for dispute or hesitation. Murmurs rippled through the witnesses, the quiet acknowledgement of authority spreading like a wave as the implications sank in. Pilots adjusted their postures, guards shifted subtly, and staff members straightened, each recognizing the careful orchestration of calm control and validated power. Jasmine allowed a slow breath, her eyes sweeping across the pad, observing every reaction, reinforcing the understanding that authority is measured not in volume, but in clarity, presence, and verification. The ambient hum of the helicopters, the faint wind across the helipad, and the collective intake of awareness from the onlookers combined into a tangible tension, a sense that the next moments would solidify the consequences of underestimation and the recognition of Jasmine's rightful command, leaving everyone on the pad, from the staff to Ethan Crawford, understanding that patience, precision, and calm authority could achieve what noise and threats never could. The helipad remained enveloped in an almost tangible silence, the subtle breeze brushing across the rotor blades while Jasmine Taylor held her ground, eyes scanning the staff and pilots with quiet precision. Ethan Crawford's posture had slackened, the rigid confidence replaced with an uneasy awareness that the dynamic of the pad had irrevocably changed. The staff and onlookers watched intently, the weight of her calm authority settling over every movement, every breath. Jasmine's assistant whispered a confirmation, subtle yet final, signaling that the verification protocols had fully executed, ensuring that control over each helicopter and operational procedure was absolute. Jasmine shifted her gaze toward Ethan, the steadiness of her eyes conveying a quiet command, the kind that did not need to be shouted, yet demanded recognition. A pilot stepped slightly back, his hands hovering over a control panel, hesitant to act without acknowledgement of her verified authority. Murmurs arose softly among the staff, an acknowledgement that the situation was no longer about assertion but about rightful oversight and recognized ownership. Jasmine's fingers tapped lightly on the tablet, confirming final access and control points across the fleet, the screens reflecting her command, displaying the results of carefully orchestrated verification. The sunlight glinted off the metal surfaces of the helicopters, casting fleeting shadows across the tarmac, heightening the awareness of everyone present that the calm command she held was deliberate and decisive. Ethan attempted to speak, a weak challenge to the unfolding order, but hesitated as the weight of her presence and the precision of her actions made his authority seem nominal and irrelevant. Jasmine inhaled slowly, letting the pause resonate, allowing the anticipation to rise among witnesses, emphasizing that control was exercised through clarity, presence, and verified power rather than volume or showmanship. The staff shifted subtly, some lowering their tablets, some straightening instinctively, each aware that the pad had been transformed into a space of quiet authority, a place where patience and precision had supplanted pretense. Jasmine's voice finally broke the silence, calm, steady, and precise. All flight operations are to remain grounded. No departures will occur without full authorization. The statement carried across the pad, the finality of it sinking into every mind present, leaving the staff, the pilots, and Ethan to fully absorb the undeniable assertion of control. Observers leaned in slightly, capturing every gesture, understanding that the quiet enforcement of authority could shape outcomes more profoundly than loud confrontation ever could. The hum of the rotor blades, the faint wind, and the focused stillness of Jasmine combined into a palpable tension, a lesson in the power of measured, deliberate oversight, leaving the audience and staff alike anticipating the resolution of the moment and the recognition of rightful command that had quietly but completely shifted the balance on the helipad. The moment on the helipad held as a suspended breath, every eye fixed on Jasmine Taylor as she maintained her composed stance, her presence commanding respect without a single overt gesture of force. Ethan Crawford shifted uneasily, a subtle tightening of his shoulders betraying his discomfort as he watched the precision with which Jasmine controlled the environment, the calm certainty in her movements making any attempt at authority on his part seem futile. Pilots and staff alike paused, some gripping railings, some adjusting tablets, all aware that they were witnessing a display of verified command that did not rely on intimidation or volume. Jasmine's assistant whispered another confirmation over the earpiece, soft but final, affirming that the oversight systems and verification protocols were fully active, every helicopter logged, every operation accounted for, leaving no room for misinterpretation or challenge. The sunlight reflected off the polished metal of the helicopters, creating sharp glints that mirrored the clarity of her authority and the unyielding precision of her focus. Jasmine allowed a measured breath, tilting the tablet slightly to review the live confirmations on screen, ensuring that each operational check was complete and perfectly aligned with her directives. Around her, murmurs among the staff shifted from uncertainty to quiet acknowledgement, the subtle realization settling in that the calm, deliberate manner she exhibited carried far more power than any raised voice could convey. Ethan's lips parted as if to speak, then closed again, a flicker of understanding crossing his features that the previous assumptions of control were no longer valid. Jasmine's gaze swept the pad, connecting with each staff member and pilot, instilling a recognition that her authority was not arbitrary but validated, verified, and absolute. The slight rustle of the rotor blades in the wind punctuated the quiet stillness, underscoring the transformation of the helipad into a space governed by deliberate oversight and unmistakable command. Jasmine spoke, her voice calm, deliberate, resonating clearly across the expanse of the pad. All flight operations remain grounded until explicit authorization is provided. No exceptions will be made. The staff froze, pilots halted in place, and onlookers leaned slightly forward, absorbing the clarity and certainty in her words. Ethan shifted his weight, a subtle gesture of concession, understanding that the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. The quiet focus, the precise motions of her hands on the tablet, the confirmed verification of the fleet systems, and the measured authority in her tone combined into a palpable energy that settled across the pad, leaving no question about who held command. Witnesses, previously uncertain, captured every detail, recognizing that this was a masterclass in measured control, the quiet assertion of power that required no theatrics, no raised voices, only presence, preparation, and verification. The helipad, once a place of tension and assumption, now reflected the deliberate clarity of Jasmine's authority. Each person present acutely aware that the consequences of underestimation had been rendered irrelevant, and the next steps would unfold under the undeniable recognition of her rightful command. The atmosphere on the helipad remained taut, every individual present sensing the shift that had transformed ordinary tension into quiet acknowledgement of Jasmine Taylor's authority. Her stance was steady, commanding attention without a single unnecessary gesture, every movement deliberate and measured, reflecting the verification and control she had established over the fleet. Ethan Crawford stood a few steps behind, his hands resting lightly at his sides, his confidence replaced by cautious observation as he processed the undeniable authority she exhibited. The pilots, some leaning slightly toward their tablets, others adjusting the straps of their headsets, watched closely, capturing the unfolding situation with eyes wide and attention fixed, understanding that the space was no longer defined by assumptions or posturing, but by the validated command Jasmine held. Her assistant's whispered confirmations over the discreet earpiece reinforced the precision of her oversight, ensuring that every operational protocol, every flight log, and every rotor control was aligned perfectly with her directives, leaving no room for error or challenge. Jasmine shifted her gaze slowly across the pad, acknowledging the subtle movements and reactions of the staff, pilots, and onlookers, communicating without words the depth of authority she carried and the measured patience with which she exercised it. A soft wind stirred, rustling papers and brushing across the rotor blades, a quiet reminder that the environment itself seemed to respond to her presence, amplifying the sense of anticipation. Ethan attempted to assert control with a gesture, but hesitated as he recognized the futility of interruption in the face of Jasmine's calm precision. Murmurs among the staff rose gently, a mixture of recognition and tentative respect, as they realized that the assertion of power did not require confrontation, only clarity, preparation, and presence. Jasmine lifted her tablet, confirming final access points, oversight status, and operational alignment, the soft glow of the screen reflecting the thoroughness of her control. She allowed the pause to extend slightly, letting the anticipation build naturally, letting the significance of the moment settle into every observer's mind. Then she spoke, her voice calm but resonant, carrying across the helipad with a clarity that demanded attention. All fleet operations remain grounded under my direct oversight. No departures will occur without explicit authorization. The staff froze, the pilots halted, and even Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly, acknowledging the finality of her declaration. Witnesses shifted slightly, capturing every movement, every subtle indication of authority, recognizing that the quiet, deliberate execution of control had achieved more than any loud confrontation ever could. The helipad, bathed in sunlight reflecting off the helicopters, became a stage for measured, undeniable power, a demonstration that patience, precision, and calm authority can redefine expectation and establish a presence that is fully recognized by all, leaving every individual present, from staff to Ethan Crawford, understanding that the moment had shifted, and the consequences of underestimation had been permanently altered. The energy on the helipad had shifted completely, the quiet acknowledgement of Jasmine Taylor's authority now radiating through every observer present. Ethan Crawford's posture had become hesitant, the confidence he once carried replaced by cautious calculation, a recognition of the control he no longer possessed. The pilots stood near their helicopters, tablets in hand, capturing the verification screens and the methodical precision of Jasmine's movements, noting how every protocol, every access point, and every operational control had been activated seamlessly under her direction. The staff exchanged subtle glances, some lowering their heads, others adjusting positions, all aware that the calm, yet absolute presence of Jasmine had redefined the dynamics of the space. Jasmine paused, her eyes sweeping across the pad, her gaze both measured and commanding, letting the weight of past dismissals and underestimations settle over the crowd. Her assistant confirmed quietly in the earpiece that all systems remained aligned, that every helicopter and protocol was fully accounted for, reinforcing the invisible but undeniable authority she held. The sunlight glinted off the metal surfaces of the fleet, reflections highlighting the clarity and meticulousness of her oversight. Ethan shifted, taking a cautious step, but the steadiness in Jasmine's eyes caused him to hesitate, the subtle assertion of control evident without a single raised voice. Murmurs among the staff and onlookers grew softly, an acknowledgement that authority was not defined by volume or proximity, but by verified presence and deliberate action. Jasmine tilted the tablet, checking the final operational confirmations, then raised her gaze to sweep across the pad again, allowing the tension to build, letting every individual feel the full measure of her calm command. The rotor blades of the idle helicopters quivered slightly in the light breeze, echoing the quiet hum of anticipation that hung over the space. Jasmine's voice finally cut through, even and deliberate, carrying effortlessly across the helipad. Until further instructions, all fleet operations are under my oversight. No departures are authorized. The statement landed with the weight of inevitability, eliciting subtle nods and shifting glances, the realization that her authority was complete sinking into the minds of everyone present. Ethan's jaw tightened, his attempt to assert control quietly receding under the undeniable clarity of her command. Observers leaned in, some adjusting cameras, others simply absorbing the deliberate execution of authority, understanding that patience, preparation, and presence had achieved more than confrontation ever could. Jasmine's calm demeanor, precise movements, and verified control created a palpable atmosphere of respect and anticipation, leaving the staff, the pilots, and Ethan Crawford fully aware that the pad was no longer a space of negotiation, but a demonstration of deliberate, undeniable power. Every person present felt the shift, the quiet assertion of control replacing previous assumptions, and the collective attention was focused entirely on Jasmine, realizing that the next moments would fully cement her recognized authority over the fleet and the helipad itself. The helipad seemed to hold its breath as Jasmine Taylor stood at the center, her presence commanding a calm that stretched across every person in view. Ethan Crawford's expression had softened into quiet realization, the confidence he had once projected now tempered by the undeniable authority Jasmine radiated. Pilots remained close to their helicopters, tablets in hand, observing every movement, every subtle shift in posture, understanding that control here was measured by precision and verified oversight rather than raised voices or gestures. The staff murmured softly among themselves, glances exchanged, recognizing that the calm, deliberate actions Jasmine exhibited had shifted the balance, establishing her authority as absolute and recognized. Jasmine's assistant confirmed quietly over the earpiece that all operational protocols were fully aligned, that every helicopter, every access point, and every control was accounted for and responsive to Jasmine's commands. A slight wind stirred the rotor blades, producing a soft hum that seemed to underscore the tension and anticipation, while sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces, emphasizing the clarity and decisiveness of her control. Jasmine allowed a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes sweeping across the pad, observing reactions and subtle movements, reinforcing the awareness that her oversight was complete and her authority undeniable. Ethan shifted, attempting to regain composure, but the measured calm in Jasmine's gaze and the precise control over the fleet rendered any attempt at assertion ineffective. The murmurs among witnesses grew softly, a quiet acknowledgement of the definitive establishment of power, as those present recognized that patience, preparation, and clarity could command far more than volume or confrontation ever could. Jasmine tilted her tablet to review operational confirmations, each display signaling the accuracy and completeness of the oversight she had implemented. Her voice finally cut through the soft hum of the helicopters and whispered exchanges. No fleet operations will proceed until full authorization is granted. Compliance with oversight is required at all times. The words carried with a quiet authority, solidifying recognition among staff, pilots, and onlookers alike. Ethan's posture straightened slightly, a reluctant acknowledgement of the shift in dynamic, the realization that the pad was under Jasmine's verified control. Witnesses leaned in subtly, capturing the deliberate execution of authority, understanding that every detail mattered, that the quiet, methodical assertion of command had transformed the space. The helicopter blades shimmered in the sunlight, the reflections echoing the precision and clarity of Jasmine's presence. The staff, the pilots, and even Ethan absorbed the atmosphere, a mixture of respect, realization, and anticipation, fully aware that the moment had redefined authority and that the consequences of previous misjudgments were now clear. The helipad, once a space of tension and assumption, now resonated with deliberate oversight and recognized power, each observer acutely aware that Jasmine Taylor's calm, measured control had established not just command, but undeniable presence and influence over every element present. The helipad had transformed completely under Jasmine Taylor's measured command, the subtle hum of rotor blades now a backdrop to the quiet yet undeniable authority she wielded. Every person present, pilots, staff, and onlookers, held their attention on her, understanding that the dynamic had shifted irrevocably, that control no longer rested with assumptions or assertions, but with verified presence and deliberate oversight. Ethan Crawford's posture betrayed the last traces of confidence, his shoulders slightly hunched as he recognized the absolute clarity of her command, the meticulous precision in which she had executed oversight over every operational detail. Jasmine's assistant confirmed softly through the earpiece that all verification protocols were fully active, every rotor, every flight log, every operational control accounted for, reinforcing the unassailable authority she projected. Jasmine allowed a deliberate breath, her gaze sweeping the helipad, observing the reactions, the subtle movements, the acknowledgement that her calm, methodical approach had achieved complete recognition of her power. The sunlight reflected off the polished surfaces of the helicopters, flickering across the tarmac like markers of her measured dominance, while murmurs among staff transformed from uncertainty into quiet acknowledgement and respect. Jasmine's hands tapped lightly on the tablet, checking final system confirmations, her movements precise, unhurried, and commanding, a demonstration of control that required no theatrics or raised voices. She spoke, her voice carrying effortlessly across the space, measured, deliberate, and final. This fleet remains grounded under my direction. No flight operations are to occur without explicit authorization. The words resonated, settling over the pad with quiet authority, a clear signal to all that the oversight was complete, the power indisputable. Ethan shifted subtly, the last vestiges of challenge dissipating as he absorbed the full scope of her presence. Observers leaned in, some adjusting cameras, others simply taking in the moment, realizing they were witnessing the culmination of patience, preparation, and calm assertion of power. The air on the pad seemed to pulse subtly with recognition, the quiet energy of authority replacing previous tension and uncertainty. Jasmine remained poised, her expression composed, as she surveyed the pad, the staff, and the helicopters, letting the clarity of her actions resonate fully. Each person present, from pilots to staff to Ethan, felt the tangible shift in control, the culmination of deliberate and verified oversight transforming the helipad into a space defined by calm, undeniable authority. The sunlight, the hum of the rotors, the collective attention, and Jasmine's measured presence converged into a final tableau, a moment of recognition and respect that underscored the quiet but absolute power she held, leaving everyone on the pad aware that the authority she had asserted was complete, deliberate, and irreversible.